Scary telling.
I had always suffered from terrible night terrors. As a child, I would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and shaking with fear. My parents tried everything to help me, but nothing worked. I was convinced that I would never be able to escape the nightmares that haunted me. But then my father, a successful entrepreneur in the nanotechnology industry, came up with an idea. He wanted to create a space that was completely devoid of light, where I could confront my fears head-on. He called it the Barrel, a soundproof cylinder 300 meters underground that was covered in a carbon nanotube foil called Paterblack Trademark, which could capture 99.998% of any incoming light. It was an impossible, invisible building, and it was going to be my salvation. I was skeptical at first, but my father promised me that the Barrel would be the solution to my night terrors. He lit an antique lantern and led me down a rickety mining elevator to the bottom of the mine where the Barrel was located. The darkness was overwhelming, and I felt a sense of unease as we made our way towards the cylinder. As we approached the Barrel, I could see the Paterblack Trademark material covering its surface, absorbing every bit of light that came near it. It was almost as if the cylinder didn't exist, like a gaping hole in the ground that swallowed up all light and sound. My father opened the door to the Barrel, and we stepped inside. The darkness was so complete that it was like being blind. I couldn't see anything, not even my own hand in front of my face. I started to feel a sense of panic rise up in me, but my father reassured me that everything was going to be okay. We walked further into the Barrel, and I could feel the darkness pressing in on me from all sides. My father's lantern cast a feeble glow, but it was barely enough to illuminate our immediate surroundings. As we walked, I started to hear a faint whispering. It was almost like the sound of the wind, but more insistent. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it was definitely there. I tried to ignore it, but it only seemed to grow louder and more aggressive. My father didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary, and I didn't want to scare him with my own fears. But as the whispers grew louder, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread rising up in me. What if this wasn't just my imagination? What if there was something in the darkness with us? My father seemed to sense my unease, and he suggested that we sit down for a moment. He put out the lantern, and we sat in silence in the darkness. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my chest, and the whispering seemed to be getting louder and more vicious. I started to feel like something was watching us, something malevolent that was just beyond the edge of the darkness. Finally, my father lit the lantern again, and we made our way back to the elevator. As we ascended, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that we were leaving the Barrel behind. But I knew that we would have to go back, that my father wouldn't give up until I was cured of my night terrors. I just hoped that the darkness wouldn't consume me before we found a way out. As my father and I made our way back to the Barrel, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my stomach. The whispers I had heard on our previous visit had left a deep impression on me, and I was dreading hearing them again. But as soon as we stepped into the darkness of the Barrel, the whispers started up again. They were low and insistent, like 1,000 voices murmuring in unison. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it was clear that they were not friendly. My father tried to reassure me, telling me that they were just figments of my imagination. But the voices only seemed to grow louder and more taunting, urging me to give in to my fears. At first, I tried to ignore them. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing, trying to calm myself down. But it was like the whispers were inside my head, infiltrating my thoughts and pushing me towards the brink of panic. I opened my eyes and saw my father's lantern flickering in the darkness. It was barely enough to light our immediate surroundings, and I couldn't help but feel like something was lurking just beyond the edge of the light. The voices grew more vicious, their words biting and cruel. They seemed to know all of my deepest fears and insecurities, and they used them against me. I could feel my resolve crumbling, and I knew that if I didn't get out of the barrel soon, I would be lost in the darkness forever. My father tried to distract me, telling me stories and cracking jokes. But his words seemed hollow and meaningless in the face of the whispers. It was like trying to drown out a hurricane with a whisper. Finally, my father suggested that we leave. We made our way back to the elevator, but the voices followed us. They seemed to echo in the metal walls of the cylinder, surrounding us on all sides. As we ascended, I couldn't help but feel like we were leaving something behind in the darkness. Something dark and malevolent that would never let us go. When we emerged from the mine, I was trembling with fear. The voices had left their mark on me, and I knew that I would never be able to forget them. My father tried to reassure me, telling me that we would find a way to conquer the darkness. But I wasn't so sure. It felt like the darkness had already conquered me, and that there was no escape. As my father and I made our way back to the barrel, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of my stomach. The voices from our previous visit still echoed in my mind, and I could feel their presence like a physical weight on my shoulders. But this time, there was something else in the darkness with us. Something that I couldn't see or hear, but that I could feel lurking just beyond the edge of the light. As we walked deeper into the barrel, I could hear the scratching and shuffling of something moving in the darkness. My father didn't seem to notice, but I knew that something was out there, watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, I felt something cold and clammy wrap around my leg. I screamed and tried to pull away, but it was too strong. It felt like it was trying to pull me into the darkness, to swallow me whole. My father tried to pull me back, but he couldn't get a good grip. I could feel the thing pulling me closer, its grip tightening with every passing moment. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Figures, indistinct and blurry, seemed to be closing in on us from all sides. I could hear their whispers, and they were even more malicious than before. My father was trying to pull me back, but he was being held back by something else. I could hear him cursing and shouting, trying to break free. And then, suddenly, the figures were upon us. I could feel their cold, clammy fingers wrapping around me, pulling me deeper into the darkness. My father was shouting, but his voice was getting fainter and fainter. And then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of the barrel, alone. I could hear the scratching and shuffling all around me, but there was no sign of my father. The darkness seemed to be closing in on me, swallowing me up like a living thing. I tried to call out, but my voice was hoarse and weak. I was alone, in the darkness, with no way out. The whispers were back, louder and more vicious than before. And this time, they weren't just in my head. They were all around me, closing in for the kill. As I lay on the floor of the barrel, I could feel the darkness closing in on me. The whispers were all around me, and I knew that I was trapped. I tried to call out for my father, but my voice was hoarse and weak. There was no answer, no sign that he was anywhere near. I was alone, in the darkness, with no way out. The scratching and shuffling grew louder, and I could feel the figures closing in on me. They were all around me, their cold, clammy fingers reaching out for me. I tried to crawl away, but my body felt heavy and sluggish. It was like I was moving through molasses, every movement an effort. And then, suddenly, I felt something wrap around my leg. It was the same thing that had grabbed me before, pulling me down into the darkness. I screamed and tried to pull away, but it was too strong. I could hear the whispers getting louder, and they seemed to be taunting me now, laughing at my fear, reveling in my helplessness. And then, out of nowhere, I heard my father's voice. He was shouting my name, telling me to hold on. I could hear the sound of metal scraping against metal, and then suddenly the darkness was pierced by a thin beam of light. My father had found a way back into the barrel, and he was using the light to fight back the darkness. I could see the figures retreating, their grip on me weakening. My father reached down and pulled me up, and we started to make our way towards the exit. But the figures weren't done with us yet. They closed in on us, their voices growing louder and more malicious. We were surrounded on all sides, with no way out. My father tried to fight them off, but there were too many of them. They were like a swarm of locusts, consuming everything in their path. And then, suddenly, the darkness swallowed us up. The figures consumed us, dragging us down into the abyss. The last thing I heard was my father's terrified scream. And then there was nothing. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed. My father was there, looking tired and worn out. He told me that we had been rescued from the barrel, that they had found us unconscious on the floor. But I knew that wasn't the whole truth. I could still feel the darkness inside me, like a piece of it had taken root in my soul. And I knew that my father felt it too. We had opened a door that should have stayed closed, and now we would pay the price. After our harrowing experience in the barrel, my father and I were never the same. The darkness had left its mark on us, and we both knew that we would never be able to escape it. My night terrors had only grown worse, and I found myself reliving our time in the barrel over and over again in my dreams. The whispers were still there, haunting me, taunting me. My father, too, was a changed man. He had always been driven, but now his obsession with the barrel had reached new heights. He spent all of his time and money researching the darkness, trying to find a way to control it. But it was like trying to hold back a hurricane with a single finger. The darkness was too powerful, too all-consuming. It seemed to feed on our fear, growing stronger with every passing moment. And then, one day, my father disappeared. He had left a note saying that he was going back to the barrel, that he had found a way to conquer the darkness once and for all. I knew that it was a suicide mission, but I couldn't just sit back and let him go. I had to try to save him, even if it meant risking my own life. So I went back to the barrel, alone this time. As I descended in the mining elevator, I could feel the darkness closing in on me. The whispers were louder than ever, their words sharp and cruel. But I didn't let them get to me. I was determined to save my father, to bring him back from the brink of the abyss. When I reached the bottom of the mine, I lit an antique lantern and made my way towards the barrel. The darkness was overwhelming, but I refused to let it consume me. As I approached the cylinder, I could see the powder black trademark material covering its surface, absorbing every bit of light that came near it. It was almost as if the cylinder didn't exist, like a gaping hole in the ground that swallowed up all light and sound. I opened the door to the barrel and stepped inside. The darkness was so complete that it was like being blind. But I pressed on, determined to find my father. And then I saw him, standing in the darkness. He was holding a small box, his eyes fixed on the powder black trademark material covering the walls of the cylinder. I called out to him, but he didn't seem to hear me. He was lost in his own world, consumed by his obsession. And then, suddenly, the darkness consumed him. It was like a living thing, reaching out for him, swallowing him up. I tried to pull him back, but it was too late. He was lost in the abyss. I was alone in the darkness, with nothing but the whispers for company. They were all around me, their voices insistent and cruel. But I refused to let them get to me. I had to find a way out. And then, suddenly, I saw a glimmer of light. It was like a small candle in the darkness, a beacon of hope. I made my way towards it, my heart racing. When I emerged from the barrel, I was shaking with fear and exhaustion. But I was alive. And that was something. I never went back to the barrel again. But the darkness stayed with me, like a piece of it had taken root in my soul. And I knew that I would never be able to escape it.